A man is pulled over on a quiet street. Nothing seems out of the ordinary until he suddenly opens his door and steps out of the vehicle. The officer stiffens, hand moving toward his holster. Tension crackles in the air. One wrong move could spark disaster. This isn't fiction. It's not a movie. This is real life, and we're going to unpack exactly what happened, why it happened, and what it means for the safety of civilians and officers alike. Freeze frame with dramatic audio swell. Narrator: today, we dive into one of the most misunderstood and risky moments in police work, when a suspect exits a vehicle unprompted during a traffic stop. What does that mean? Is it defiance, fear, a mistake, or something more sinister? Part 1. The stop begins. 101 Ford Euro. We begin with routine. A patrol car cruises a suburban neighborhood at night. The officer, a calm and seasoned presence behind the wheel, notices a vehicle weaving slightly within its lane. It's not enough to scream drunk driver, but enough to raise suspicion. Narrator: officers are trained to pick up on subtle cues, hesitation at stop signs, inconsistent speed, sudden signaling. These can suggest impairment, distraction, or even someone looking to evade detection. Dashcam footage captures the patrol car pulling behind the suspect vehicle and activating its lights. The vehicle slows and eventually pulls to the curb. All seems routine until the driver's door opens. Narrator: this is the moment everything changes. Before the officer even steps out of his cruiser, the driver decides to get out. It's a small action with massive consequences. Part 2. The dangerous unknown. 4017E0. In training academies across the country, officers are drilled repeatedly: never let a suspect approach your patrol car. Always control the scene. You don't know what's in their hand or their head. The officer shouts a firm command: stay in the vehicle, get back in the car. But the man keeps walking, hands visible, but posture agitated. He's yelling something indistinct. Narrator: this is a nightmare scenario for law enforcement. A suspect leaving the vehicle creates chaos. Are they reaching for a weapon? Are they about to run? Are they attempting suicide by cop, provoking a fatal response on purpose? Vrasha, your commentary and insight. Real law enforcement psychology. Most civilians don't understand how quickly traffic stops can turn deadly. According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, more than 11% of police shootings begin during traffic stops. The moment someone exits the car, officers have to assess 1,000 possibilities in a split second. Behavioral analyst Dr. Linda Porter explains people exit vehicles for a wide range of reasons: confusion, panic, intoxication, a language barrier, or just bad judgment. But officers are trained to assume worst-case scenarios because they don't get second chances. Part 3. Real-life parallel. The Philando Castile incident. 7/01/10/0. One of the most heartbreaking examples of traffic stop escalation was the shooting of Philando Castile in 2016. Castile informed the officer he had a legal firearm. But as he reached for his ID, the officer panicked, thinking he was reaching for the gun. Within seconds, Castile was shot dead in front of his partner and a child. Narrator: that case wasn't about someone exiting the car, but it shows just how delicate these encounters are. A wrong word, a wrong movement, or a nervous assumption can cost a life. At Part 4, the officer's response, Washington NRO 1-13. Back in our primary scene, the officer draws his taser. Not his gun, a decision that may have saved the man's life. Narrator: noticed the measured response. Despite the driver's erratic behavior, the officer chooses the non-lethal option. He continues issuing commands, calm but authoritative. Eventually, the man complies. He raises his hands, drops to his knees, and is handcuffed without further incident. Later, we learn he was disoriented due to a medical issue, possibly low blood sugar, and thought he was being pulled over for help, not a violation. Commentary: the human factor. The 13/01/15. This is the nuance people often miss. Not every tense encounter is a sign of aggression or guilt. Some are rooted in confusion, health issues, or fear. But officers don't have the luxury of hindsight in the moment. Narrator: the man survived. No one was hurt, but the outcome could have been very different. And if this officer hadn't held his nerve, we'd be talking about a tragedy. Part 5. The officer's split-second dilemma. 15/101/18/0. When someone exits a vehicle during a traffic stop, the officer must instantly switch from protocol to improvisation. Let's break down the tactical considerations. Narrator. At this point, the officer is vulnerable. He's not behind cover. He's outside his vehicle. His backup may still be minutes away, and yet he's staring at a suspect approaching him who may be compliant or combative. Tactical experts explain that officers have a narrow window to act. If they react too slowly, they risk being overpowered. If they react too aggressively, they risk escalation or wrongful use of force. This scenario demands composure, clarity, and experience. Part 6. Why do some people exit the car? Is 18 or a 1-2100? Many viewers ask, why would anyone get out of their car during a stop? Narrator. The truth is, it happens more often than you think, and usually it's not malicious. Let's explore 5 common reasons civilians exit vehicles: unprompted ignorance of the law. Many drivers simply don't know that exiting the car is considered dangerous and can be interpreted as threatening. Medical distress. Like in our main story, some people are suffering from diabetic episodes, seizures, or confusion that make them act irrationally. Panic. A person may fear arrest due to suspended licenses, past warrants, or unrelated fears, and try to get ahead of the situation. Language barrier. Immigrants or tourists may not understand commands yelled in English and react with unintended noncompliance. Substance influence. Drugs or alcohol can severely impair judgment and coordination, leading to unpredictable behavior. Real-life example, the case of Maurice Gordon, New Jersey, 2020. Maurice Gordon was stopped by a New Jersey state trooper. He exited his vehicle several times despite being told to stay inside. The interaction ended with Gordon being shot multiple times after a struggle. Narrator. While investigations would later show Gordon was unarmed, the trooper perceived his repeated actions as resistance and threat. The moment a suspect ignores commands, the dynamic becomes volatile. Hey, Part 7, Police Protocol Breakdown, 21-01-2400. When a driver exits the vehicle, officers are trained to immediately instruct them to return to the car. Keep distance and avoid being rushed. If necessary, use intermediate force options like a taser or baton. Call for backup immediately. But this training varies by department. Smaller departments may have fewer resources, less frequent retraining, or different escalation thresholds. Narrator. In our Cops episode, the officer chooses control over force. That distinction between power and control is crucial. The officer doesn't panic, he doesn't shoot, he stabilizes. Part 8, Behind the Camera Editing and Context, 24-01-270. Shows like Cops are edited for entertainment. That means moments of silence may be removed. Tension may be enhanced through audio and visuals. Officer mistakes may be downplayed or omitted. Narrator. To really understand what's happening, you have to look beyond the camera angle. Why was the driver so agitated? Did the officer issue multiple warnings? Was the man on medication or dealing with mental illness? Without full context, viewers may misinterpret either side's intentions. Commentary, the role of body cams. One major advancement in traffic stop transparency is the rise of body cameras. They often provide more complete footage, audio of both parties, chain of events without cuts or edits. In many high-profile cases, body cam footage has either cleared or condemned officers depending on their conduct. Part 9, How Police Evaluate Threats, 27-01-30. In every traffic stop, officers are evaluating risk using something called the totality of circumstances. That means they're not judging based on one action, but everything: time of night, the way the car pulled over, the driver's body language, their tone of voice, his shuri, the neighborhood's crime rate. Narrator. It's a psychological chess game, a tense dance where reading the wrong cue on either side can trigger catastrophe. Real-life story, officer ambush during a traffic stop. In 2021, New Mexico State Police Officer Darian Jarrett was conducting a traffic stop. The suspect, who had a rifle hidden, stepped out and fired immediately, killing Jarrett. Narrator. This is why many officers are wary the moment someone exits the car. They've seen colleagues killed. They know what's possible. Part 10, Humanity on Both Sides. 31-33. But it's important to remember, not every traffic stop is a standoff. Sometimes it's just a misunderstanding. A woman once exited her vehicle during a stop because she believed her taillight was broken and wanted to show it to the officer. She was terrified when the officer yelled at her. She said, "I wasn't trying to scare him. I just didn't want to get a ticket for something I thought wasn't broken." Narrator, that gap between what civilians think they're doing and how officers interpret it is where danger lives. Commentary, communication breakdown. One of the most fixable problems in American policing is the communication gap. Clearer public education campaigns, high school training modules, and multilingual PSAs could teach people how to behave during stops. Things like keeping hands on the wheel, not reaching for belongings until instructed, staying in the car unless told otherwise. Narrator. When people don't know the rules, they make dangerous mistakes. Part 11. Fear and misunderstanding. 330136E0. Sometimes civilians panic not because they're guilty, but because they're afraid of what comes next. Narrator. There's a deeply ingrained fear in many communities, especially communities of color, about encounters with police. Years of viral videos, tragic deaths, and personal stories have created a climate of fear. People might exit their car not to attack, but to show they aren't hiding anything. Unfortunately, from the officer's perspective, that same act can look like aggression or evasion. Psychologist Dr. Emily Hart, fear makes people behave irrationally. It also triggers fight or flight responses. If someone believes they'll be arrested or worse, they might run or act out even if they've done nothing wrong. Saputori, Part 12, The Power of Body Language, 360139E0. Let's talk about body language, an underrated but vital component in traffic stops. Officers look for quick movements, reaching into pockets, avoiding eye contact, exaggerated friendliness, repeated shifting or fidgeting. Narrator. It's not about profiling, it's about pattern recognition. The same way poker players read tells officers, read movement. In our video, the man stepping out doesn't raise his voice. He walks upright but not aggressively. That gives the officer a sliver of calm, a reason to de-escalate rather than react. Nufreneber, Part 13. Real-world story. The jogger who wasn't. In 2019 in Kansas, officers were called after reports of a suspicious man running through backyards. When they stopped him, he explained he was jogging. He was winded, nervous, and didn't have ID. When asked to stay still, he stepped forward and said, "I live right over there." He was immediately tackled. Narrator. This wasn't a criminal, he was just a black man jogging. But his attempt to explain himself by stepping toward the officer was read as a threat. Even small missteps in physical space can lead to violence. Part 14, The Officer's Mindset. 390142 Now let's flip the lens, what's going through the officer's mind. Narrator. We often forget that officers are human too. Every stop they make could be their last. Every open car door could hide a gun. Every gesture could be a feint. In our episode, the officer keeps a calm but commanding tone. That matters. According to a study from the National Police Foundation, suspects are 57% more likely to comply when officers speak slowly and clearly rather than yelling or issuing rapid-fire commands. It's not just what you say, but how you say it. Part 15, The Legal Side. What are your rights? 42 Joy 1 4500. Legally, in most U.S. states, a police officer can order you to stay inside your vehicle. Step outside the vehicle. Keep your hands visible. Refrain from reaching into compartments. Failure to comply can be considered obstruction or failure to follow lawful orders, even if no crime was originally committed. Narrator. Yes, you have rights, but those rights don't shield you from immediate consequences during a stop. The courtroom is where you argue, not the roadside. Civil rights attorneys often advise remain silent other than identifying yourself. Ask if you are free to go. Never argue or resist, even if you believe the stop is unjust. Sapenwarrior commentary, The Civilian Dilemma. This creates a difficult balancing act for civilians. Do you assert your rights and risk being misunderstood, or comply completely, even if you feel it's unfair? There's no perfect answer, but survival and safety always come first. Narrator. Even if you plan to fight a traffic ticket or sue for misconduct later, you need to make it through the stop safely. That's the priority. RE transition zoom out. Let's pause for a moment. We've talked about what happened during the stop, how the officer handled it, How the civilian's behavior shaped the encounter. Real-life parallels with tragic or volatile results. Next, we'll dive deeper into the after effects, what happens once someone is detained, and how departments respond to these incidents. Part 16, Detaining Without Arrest, 4501-4800. Narrator. Here's a question most viewers don't think to ask. Once the man was handcuffed, was he actually under arrest? In many cases like this one, a person may be detained, but not technically arrested. According to the Supreme Court ruling Terry v. Ohio 1968, officers can temporarily detain someone if they have reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. That's not the same as probable cause, which is required for an arrest. In our cop scene, the driver was handcuffed until he could be properly questioned and evaluated. Narrator handcuffing doesn't always mean a crime was committed. Sometimes it's a safety precaution, especially when someone exits their vehicle unexpectedly. After Part 17, What Happens in the Patrol Car, 4801-51. After detaining a suspect, officers usually run a background check, verify registration and license status, check for outstanding warrants, ask basic questions about what led to the incident. In this episode, we learn the man was experiencing a medical event. He seemed disoriented and didn't remember getting out of the car. Emergency medical services were eventually called. Narrator. These moments never make the headlines. They're too quiet, too human, but they matter. An EMT team checks the man's blood sugar. He's clearly not a criminal, just someone who needed help and panicked under pressure. Part 18, the officer's paperwork and report, 5101-5490. Viewers don't usually see what happens after the cameras stop rolling. But for officers, the real work often starts after the suspect is gone. They must write detailed reports that justify the stop, document behavior, explain any use of force, show why the person was detained. Narrator. Those reports can make or break a career. If an officer forgets a detail or writes something inconsistent with footage, it could lead to disciplinary action or worse. In recent years, some departments have even begun auditing officer reports against body cam footage to ensure transparency. Part 19, Accountability After the Incident, 5401-57. Once the dust settles, agencies may review the stop for officer misconduct, procedural violations, community backlash. In this case, because the officer remained calm and didn't escalate unnecessarily, there were no disciplinary findings. Narrator. But that's not always the case. If force had been used or if the man had been harmed, the review process could trigger lawsuits, protests, or termination. Internal affairs civilian review boards or external watchdogs may all become involved. Real-world case, the Sandra Bland traffic stop at Texas 2015. Sandra Bland was pulled over for a minor traffic violation. The officer escalated the situation, quickly arresting her for failing to signal and allegedly resisting arrest. 3 days later, she was found dead in her jail cell. Narrator. Her case sparked national outrage, not because she was killed by an officer at the scene, but because a routine stop became a gateway to tragedy. Her death forced states to reconsider how long people can be detained without charges, how mental health is assessed in jail, the need for dash cam and body cam footage transparency. Shitagari Part 20, Training for the Future, 5701-6000. So what's changing? Many departments are adopting de-escalation training, which focuses on slowing down the interaction, using non-confrontational language, identifying signs of distress or mental illness, creating physical space before using force. Narrator. In the episode we've been analyzing, you can see the benefits of this approach. The officer gave commands clearly. He didn't rush in. He gave the man space to correct his actions. It wasn't luck, it was training. Commentary, why this matters. Every traffic stop is a potential powder keg. That's not being dramatic, it's reality. In the U.S., more than 100 people are killed by police every year during traffic stops, according to Mapping Police Violence. But the vast majority of these interactions end without violence. Narrator. And when they do, it's usually because one or both parties showed restraint, patience, and understanding. The kind of outcome we want to see more of. Part 21. Traffic stops as a flashpoint in American policing, 6001-6300. Narrator. Why do traffic stops spark so many controversies, protests, and tragedies? The answer lies in how deeply they intertwine race, class, fear, and law enforcement power. In the United States, traffic stops are the most common form of police-civilian interaction. According to the Stanford Open Policing Project, over 50,000 drivers are pulled over every day. Black and Latino drivers are disproportionately stopped and searched despite being less likely to have contraband than white drivers. Narrator. That imbalance builds resentment, distrust, and a sense of danger for many civilians, especially young men of color. Part 22, How Pretext Stops Lead to Bigger Problems. Choose Ashen 63, while 1, 66 is 0. A pretext stop is when police pull over a car for a minor violation, like a broken taillight, or failing to signal because they suspect something bigger is going on. These stops are legal under Wren v. United States 1996, but they've been widely criticized. Critics argue they enable racial profiling, allow subjective enforcement, create unnecessary risk. Supporters argue they lead to the discovery of drugs, weapons, and fugitives, are effective law enforcement tools. Narrator. But let's be honest, if a broken taillight leads to someone being killed, the system has to ask if that risk is worth the reward. Shurini, real-world parallel. Dante Wright, Brooklyn Center, Minnesota, 2021. Dante Wright was pulled over for expired registration and an air freshener hanging from his mirror, 2 minor violations. He was unarmed, but when officers tried to arrest him for a warrant, he pulled away. Officer Kim Potter, believing she was holding her taser, shot him with her firearm instead. Narrator. That mistake, seconds long, took a young man's life and changed countless others forever. And it started with a simple stop. Part 23, Why Minor Stops Can Be Major Triggers. 6601 69 For civilians, minor stops often feel like harassment. For officers, they're routine but never without risk. This tension is worsened by cultural divides. People from different backgrounds often interpret tone and authority differently. Economic pressure fines from minor stops can spiral into license suspensions and jail time. Social media, any stop can become viral footage, sometimes selectively edited or sensationalized. Narrator. Add in adrenaline past trauma and the presence of weapons, and you've got a cocktail ready to ignite. Part 24, Cops TV Show, Influence on Public Perception. 69 101 72 Urbian. Cops, which aired for decades, helped shape how the public views law enforcement, often portraying suspects as bad guys and officers as heroes. Critics argue that the show reinforces racial stereotypes. Suspects are often shown at their worst without follow-up. Editing removes nuance and humanity. In 2020, the show was briefly canceled amid rising concern over police portrayal, but was later revived. Narrator. In this episode, we see a balanced portrayal, an officer using restraint. But that's not always the case, and we must be mindful of the narrative being told. Commentary. Why fair use rewrites like this matter. What we're doing in this video, analyzing, critiquing, and expanding on the original, is important. It creates space for discussion, room for education, context around real-life consequences. Narrator. We're not just replaying drama, we're learning from it. And that makes the difference between glorification and growth. Part 25, The Community Impact of High-Profile Stops. 72 Yuan 1, 75 Rayum. When a traffic stop ends badly, entire communities feel the ripple. Consequences include protests and civil unrest, lawsuits that cost taxpayers millions. Families forever change, distrust between law enforcement and citizens. But when a stop ends well, like the one in our Cops episode, it often fades quietly without headlines. Narrator. Maybe it's time we start highlighting those stories more. The ones where things go right because someone stayed calm, communicated clearly, and kept control. Part 26. What happens to the civilian afterward. 7501 7800. In this Cops episode, the man who exited his vehicle was released after paramedics confirmed his medical emergency. Narrator. He wasn't charged. No force was used. The situation de-escalated thanks to the officer's discretion. But what happens to someone after a stop like this? Even without criminal charges, the psychological toll can be real: public humiliation, anxiety about future stops, medical trauma worsening due to stress, possible job loss from the time involved. Sometimes these encounters appear on national television immortalized without context or the suspect's side of the story. Part 27, The Power of Discretion, 7801-8100. Discretion is one of the most powerful tools in law enforcement and also the most controversial. Police officers can decide whether to write a citation or give a warning, whether to search a vehicle, whether to detain or de-escalate. In our episode, the officer used discretion wisely. He didn't arrest the man for failure to comply. He called medics instead. Narrator, but that's not always the case. Some officers use discretion to intimidate or punish rather than protect. Part 28, Training that Saves Lives, 81-1-8400. Let's highlight some modern training practices that are making stops safer. Crisis Intervention Training (CIT) helps officers identify and respond appropriately to mental health and medical issues. Scenario-based de-escalation officers practice real-life simulations where suspects behave unpredictably, helping them build reflexive calm. Implicit bias training encourages awareness of racial, gender, and socioeconomic bias that can affect decisions unconsciously. Narrator. The best officers aren't just enforcers, they're observers, communicators, and when necessary, caregivers. Part 29, Civilian Education Saves Lives, 2, 84-101-87, NAS. Education isn't just for officers. Civilians must understand how to safely navigate a traffic stop. Unfortunately, many schools don't teach it. What civilians should know: don't exit your vehicle unless asked. Keep hands visible at all times. Don't reach for documents until instructed. Stay calm and speak clearly. Ask questions respectfully if confused. Narrator. The more civilians understand the expectations during a stop, the fewer misunderstandings there will be, and the more lives will be preserved. Corporate real-world story, a teen's calm saves the day. In Virginia, a 17-year-old was pulled over for speeding. He immediately turned on his interior lights, placed both hands on the steering wheel, and announced everything he was doing before moving. His composure helped the officer stay calm, too. The stop ended with a warning and a thank you. Narrator, this isn't about being submissive. It's about surviving the moment and building trust. Part 30, The Role of Technology in Preventing Escalation, 87-01-90. Technology is becoming a major tool in traffic stop safety. License plate readers reduce the need for face-to-face ID checks. Body-worn cameras increase accountability. AI-enhanced dash cams can detect erratic driving and trigger alerts. Automatic vehicle stop logs help departments track patterns in officer behavior. Some departments are even exploring telestop systems where a supervisor can monitor stops in real time and intervene if needed. Narrator. We're entering an age where the camera doesn't just record, it protects. Spree West, Part 31, Innovations that Prevent Escalation, 90-01-93-00. Across the country, departments are exploring new technologies that help reduce unnecessary confrontations during traffic stops. Examples include remote speaker systems, allowing officers to instruct drivers from a distance: keep your hands up, remain in the car to avoid approaching the vehicle immediately. Driver safety apps, which automatically notify a loved one when you're pulled over and activate video, audio recording. Automatic vehicle alert systems, which scan behavior and license plate data to assess risk levels before the officer approaches. Narrator. In an era where smartphones and cameras are everywhere, technology can be a silent partner in keeping both drivers and officers safe. 1. Part 32. Officers need protection too. MUSH 93-01-96-0. We often focus on how civilians can survive traffic stops, but officers also face real danger, and they deserve protection too. They experience split-second life-or-death decisions, constant scrutiny from media and the public, the threat of lawsuits or criminal charges for mistakes, emotional trauma from violent or tragic encounters. One study shows that nearly 30% of police officers develop PTSD symptoms within their first 5 years of duty. Narrator. If we want better decision-making on the street, we need to support our officers not just with gear and laws, but with mental health care and meaningful training. Part 33, Real Story When Compassion Won, 96-01-98-0. In Oregon 2022, a state trooper pulled over a woman for speeding. She was sobbing her mother had just been hospitalized and she was panicking. Instead of issuing a ticket, the officer listened. He stayed with her for 5 minutes, comforted her, and even prayed with her at the roadside. No citations, no cuffs. Narrator. No flashing lights or body slams. Just humanity. Just compassion. That's policing at its best. That moment didn't go viral, but maybe it should have. Part 34. Culture must change, not just policies. 98-01-99. 30 laws can shape how police interact with the public, but culture is what decides how they interpret those laws. If an officer is trained in a culture of fear and suspicion, they'll treat every movement as a threat. If the public is raised in a culture of fear and mistrust, they'll treat every officer as an enemy. Narrator. If we want different outcomes, we need different expectations from both sides. That begins with how we talk about police, teach about rights, and train both officers and citizens. Part 35, Building Positive Traffic Stops, 99-31-102 EURs. What if we created a world where traffic stops felt like community interaction instead of a standoff? Imagine drivers calmly keeping hands on the wheel, knowing their rights. Officers giving clear, non-aggressive instructions. Mutual respect guiding the exchange. Result: no violence, no fear, no court battles, no funerals. Narrator. This Cops episode gave us a rare glimpse of how it can go right when one man makes a wrong move and one officer makes the right call. Part 36, Beyond the Headlines. Kijasham 102-01-105 Zijashiram. Narrator. Most traffic stops don't make the news. They don't go viral. They don't end in tragedy, but they still matter. For every explosive clip we see online, there are hundreds of quiet, peaceful interactions that never get shared. Those moments often include calm conversations, warnings instead of tickets, empathy instead of escalation. And yet we rarely talk about them. Why? Because peace isn't always entertaining, but it is essential. Sarwantori, Part 37, From Mistake to Message, Shekun 105, R1, 108, Ra. In our Cops episode, the man made a mistake. He stepped out of the vehicle unexpectedly. But that mistake didn't become a tragedy because the officer stayed composed, gave clear instructions, considered alternative explanations like a medical condition, used non-lethal force options. Narrator. One decision by one officer changed everything. And that's the lesson we take forward. This wasn't a perfect stop. It was a human stop with emotion, uncertainty, and risk. But it ended well. That's the gold standard. Part 38, Real Reform Requires Real Dialogue, 108-01-111-0. If we want to fix broken systems, we must be willing to listen to each other, accept uncomfortable truths, share power and responsibility, acknowledge the dignity of both officer and civilian. Narrator. Policing isn't just about laws, it's about relationships. Every stop is a moment where trust can be built or destroyed. Change starts when both sides show up, ready to understand, not just react. Part 39, The Power of Education. You're said in 111, Jaro 1, 100 Imagine a country where high schoolers are taught how to navigate police encounters. Officers are taught how to diffuse conflict with psychology, not just force. The public understands the law and their rights. Stops are about dialogue, not domination. That future is possible, but it takes effort. And videos like this analyzing real encounters, unpacking what went right or wrong, are part of that movement. Part 40, Final Takeaway: Compliance versus Survival, 114-01-117-0. We often hear the phrase, just comply. But that's not always easy, especially when fear, confusion, or past trauma enters the equation. Narrator. So here's a better phrase. Stay alive. First, argue later. Stay calm. Stay alert. Communicate clearly. Record if needed. Don't escalate even if you believe you're right. Because courtrooms exist for a reason, but you have to survive the stop to reach them. Closing message 1. Traffic stop, one step outside the car, one officer choosing calm over chaos, and one life that didn't have to end. This is how change starts, not just with outrage, but with observation. Not just with blame, but with better behavior from everyone involved. If you found this breakdown helpful, informative, or thought-provoking, share it. Start a conversation. Ask your local leaders what they're doing to improve traffic stop outcomes. And most importantly, stay safe. Stay smart, stay human.